Hey guys, I've got one of the new laundry centers here. I'm going to go ahead and do a tear down on it, show you guys how to take this thing apart. Before starting any work on any appliance, make certain that you're wearing proper safety equipment, gloves, glasses, any other PPE you feel is needed, and make certain that the unit is unplugged for safety. We don't need any voltage going to this unit during teardown. So I'm going to start this by removing the center panel between my dryer and my washer machine. Hidden behind this panel is my tech sheet, and I want to go ahead and pull that out. Tech sheets on these come in handy because you can actually review them to understand how to put the unit through diagnostics, perform specific tests, instead of having to just wait for the unit to hit a certain function during its operation on a cycle. But here's my tech sheet wiring diagram. I'm going to go ahead and take this center panel off and set it off to the side as well as my tech sheet. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and tear down the dryer section of our laundry center first. We're going to go ahead and remove this panel right here so that we can gain access to the ductwork. This unit has a new vent. They call it a long vent. There's 5 screws that hold this panel in place. 2 over here on this side, 1 right here in the middle, 2 right here in the corner. Oh, there's a 6th one actually. There's 1 here and there's 1 there. So there are 6 screws that hold this panel up. There we go. We can go ahead and set this panel off to the side for now. So I pulled out the 2 screws that hold my control assembly. I'm going to pry outwards at the bottom. We're going to slide down and then pull straight forward. And that's going to allow us to pull our control assembly off. Now, there's a clip right here on the right side or on the left side of our cabinet, and to make certain that we're not pulling on our 2 blue wires that go to our door switch, I'm going to disconnect this and allow my control panel just to rest on top of the washer. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove, there's 4 screws that hold this duct to the blower. I've got to remove those 4 screws because I like to pull this whole panel off as one piece and bring my blower assembly with it. Now, one of these screws is tucked right here behind the ductwork. If you have a long screwdriver like I have, or a ratcheting or an angle screwdriver, it's going to work beautifully to get back in there and access it. Now that I've got the 2 screws out the bottom of this front panel, we have 4 screws across the top. That's the only thing that's securing this whole front panel to the unit right now. Now what I do is I'm going to go ahead and remove the screws from my door. I'm going to remove my door. That's going to alleviate a little bit of the weight, make it a little bit easier to handle as I'm actually taking the panel off, or better yet, whenever I'm putting the panel back on. And we can set the door assembly off to the side. Now I've got these 4 screws I was talking about that are holding this thing to the top. They lip over the very top of the unit. So let me go ahead and pull these 4 screws out. Make sure you're supporting this front panel as you pull these screws out. Once you get the 4 screws removed, you're going to lift it up and pull the whole assembly up and away. We can set this off to the side. So next I'm going to pull our drum out. Now to get enough space to lift this drum up, because it's in one of those ball joints, I always call them the catch cup, the ball joint and the catch cup. So that ball is sitting inside of that catch cup. To take it out, we're going to have to lift the back of this drum up, which means we got to pull this top panel off. Now there's more screws across the top here. I'm going to go ahead and take all these screws out and then I'll get right back to you guys. So I've got all my screws out, so now I can remove my top panel, and we're going to set this off to the side. All right, so at this point, I've got to release my belt tensioner. My belt is still holding onto my drum, so I'm going to go ahead and release my tensioner. Now you can do this from the back, but I know most of these units are shoved inside of small spaces, inside of closets and the like. So I'm used to doing it from the front. Now that I got my tensioner off, I'm going to bring my belt all the way out so that it doesn't get damaged. And we're going to set this down. Now my drum, you got to lift up and pull it directly forward. You've got a little bit of play on these two sides now that all of our bracing's gone. So lifting it up, pull forward. And there's that ball joint I was talking about right there on the back that you have that sits inside of the catch cup. But now we got our drum out, we can set this thing off to the side. All right, so I need to remove the idler spring that's actually creating tension on my belt because it's securing the idler, which is part of this assembly I'm trying to pull off to the bottom frame. So let me go ahead and get in here and disengage it. All right, now that we've got all of those screws taken out of our motor mount in the base and we've got that bracket pulled off that went right here, I've got all my wires disconnected and my tensioner, my spring pulled off of my idler that was creating the tension. We can pull this whole assembly forward and take it out as one whole piece. That's my motor, my tensioner, and my blower. And we can disassemble this some more. All right, so to take the blower off, there's a flat spot on the drive shaft. Now make certain that you're on the proper one because this does have a small little pulley and a belt. So we want the drive shaft that's going directly into where our blower case is, and we're going to lock it, and then we're going to rotate our fan until we can pull it off of our shaft. There we go. Before we remove our motor, you always want to take into account which direction our plug is facing. That way, whenever we put it back in its location, we put it back the same direction. That way we don't have any problem making our electrical connection back to it. We've got two clips. I'm going to use a pair of needle nose. I'm going to push downwards and pry forwards and pop my motor mounting clip off the front, and then I'm going to do the same back here in the back. Now my motor should lift up and off of this cradle, and there's our motor assembly. So I did want to point out down here that micro switch, that's our belt switch. So if the belt snaps and we lose the tension, then this is going to, our idler is going to contact that switch and let the unit know. So this quick disconnect I said went to a thermistor. This actually goes to our belt switch. I'm going to go ahead and pull my heater out for you guys. We're going to start by disconnecting my limiter over here. Then I'm going to disconnect my heater, and then I'm going to go after the thermostat up there. All right, let's go ahead and pull our pan itself. It's 4 screws. Make sure you support the pan as you pull out this last screw. All right, so they also added these 2 screws right here on the back of the pan to help with any type of flexing from the metal during the heating process. So we got to remove these to get that pan out as well. Now make certain whenever you remove this second screw, this is the last thing that is holding that pan in place, and make certain that you're supporting that pan on the other side. All right, and there's our heater. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my catch cup off the wall, Now, hopefully it'll be a long time before you find that this needs to be replaced. But it is good to show you how to take one off. So it's just got these 2 screws. All right, so most of you guys are already familiar with the catch cup back here on the back that holds the big metal ball, the bearing assembly for our drum. If you have not done one of these before, anytime you remove that catch cup, there's a little bracket inside of that wall that drops down. I'm going to show you how to put that bracket back in. Now, unfortunately, it does involve having to get back behind the unit to be able to do it. If you have 2 men, you can even have them. I'm going to do it using tape. All right, so if you get to the back of your unit, you're going to see this little round cover back here. It's got 3 screws in it. I went ahead and pulled 2 of them out. Take my 3rd one out here. And as you pull this off, you're going to see this little bracket hanging out inside of that little cover. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bracket, I'm going to set it back up here in place. It just holds the 2 screws that hold my catch cup, and I'm going to tape it. And that way, whenever I go back around, I'm not having to be on both sides, holding this bracket and on the inside trying to run the screws back in. Also wanted to point out, if you look inside of your catch cup, there's actually a little ball, a little metal bearing down inside of there. Make certain that little ball is in its location before you put this catch cup back in. Usually the grease holds it inside of there, but if it's missing, we're only going to create a problem for the consumer. So make certain that gets put back if it falls out. Now that I verified that my ball is in place and that the bracket is in place, I'm going to go ahead and reinstall my catch cup. All right, guys, make sure you do remove the tape, though. We do not want to leave it on the back of this appliance. And then I'm going to go ahead and reinstall my cover. All right, so I pretty much got this thing completely tore down for you guys. The last thing I wanted to point out was this thermal up here in the top left corner. That is still there. I'm going to go ahead and put the dryer back together. You guys come back for part 2, where I'm going to tear down the washing machine. All right, guys, for the washing machine, I'm going to utilize this board. If you notice, there's 2 screws down at the bottom of this panel right here. Those 2 screws actually go in at an upwards angle. So to assist, to make it a little bit easier to remove them, I'm going to use my board to lift my unit up slightly. And it's going to give me a little bit more of an angle that I can actually remove these screws easily. Now I do have that board pushed all the way under there, enough to where it's actually under the frame. It is not just being supported by this front panel. I wouldn't leave it just under the front panel, because you can end up bending or damaging, scarring something. Now I'm going to go ahead and lean it again and remove my board. All right, so next I'm going to release my 2 locking tabs up here in the front. Take a flat blade and shove it in. Pull upwards. Now this entire front panel, only those 2 screws were actually securing it, and these 2 clips at the top, so I can push down, release it, and this whole panel will now pull straight forward, up and off. And we can set this off to the side. All right, so next I'm going to remove my lid lock. We're going to do this by using that same flat blade. I'm going to slide it under the front of my lid lock, releasing it, and then I'm going to pull the whole thing forward from underneath and drop it inside. Now we can take this entire piece, our top, and we can set this off to the side. Just be careful as you're removing this lid. It does have springs on the hinging to create tension We don't need it to pop back and hit you in the face, so just hold on to it as you're moving it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and disconnect my lid lock assembly. Now it's got two wires here that go to my micro switch, a black and a red. I'm going to go ahead and remove both of these. Then I've got my 4-pin connector that only has 3 wires in it, blue, black, and white, and I'm going to remove that connector, and that's going to let us take the lid lock and set this off to the side. The pressure sensor down here, it's in my front right corner. It's got 3 black wires that go to it. I'm going to take the wires off first. Remove its RAS connector. Then I'm going to take the hose. It's got a little clip here at the top, and we're going to release the hose tension so that I can pull my hose off. Whoop. And there's my pressure sensor removed. Go ahead and set that off to the side. And the last piece that I have up here is my out of balance switch. It's actually right here. It's hiding behind this panel. All right, so next I'm going to remove my out of balance switch here. There's 2 screws that go through this metal bracket right here. Now that switch is just a micro switch that has 2 wires going to it. Fish my harness for my door lock out. Disconnect my wires off of the micro switch. Whoop. So now I've got my out of balance switch mechanism out. I can go ahead and set this off to the side. All right, so as you can see, my drain hose is connected right here on the side of my drain pump. It's got 1 tension clamp on there, spring-loaded clamp. I'm going to go ahead and release this. Now, I vacuumed my unit down, so I shouldn't have a lot of water whenever I remove this hose, but if you do not vacuum the unit down, put a wet dry vac on the drain hose to get all the water out, then you're probably going to have a good amount of water still left inside of this. All right, guys, not to confuse you, but as you can see, I've moved to the back of the unit. This unit actually separates. The washer and the dryer come completely apart. I've gone as far as I can on the front side, so now it was time to move to the back side so that we can continue with our teardown. But to get any further, I've got to get this dryer off the top. Now we're going to start by pulling out our main control board, which is right behind this panel. We got 2 5/16 screws I'm going to remove. Once we get the screws out, we're just going to pry this board out. It does have 2 little tension clips on each side to hold it in place, so they can be a little bit hard to pry out of here. There we go. All right, so this harness, as you can see, is going up to my dryer. I'm not worried about taking that harness off because we're pulling the dryer, so the control can go with the dryer. Harness I'm worried about are these 2 that are going to the washer machine. So we're going to pull this harness off, and then we're going to disconnect these connectors along this left-hand side, or along this side right here, so that we can remove them. There we go. I'm going to slide those back in there. I'm just going to let my board hang down. Now there's 6 screws that secure the dryer to the washer. You got 1, 2 right here on the right-hand side. You have 1 coming up through this angle bracket down here on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and remove those ones. All right, so now that we have these screws pulled off over here on the right-hand side, it's completely free. Before I put my control board back inside of here to protect it, I'm going to fish these wires that came from my washer back down into this opening. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and slide my main control board back in to secure it back in place. I don't want it to get damaged whenever I remove the dryer and set it back down. This keeps it nice and tucked away and safe. All right, now I'm going to move to this 1 5/16 screw that's down here on this bottom angle bracket. Okay, so that entire side right here is now loose. So let's move over to the left-hand side. So over here on the left-hand side, we have 2 screws inside, 1 screw coming up from the bottom through that angle bracket. All right, so I've got the 2 pulled out from the inside. Let's pull this one out from the bottom. All right, so the last thing we need to remove, there's a screw right here that actually goes through and secures our spray nozzle whenever the water's coming into the tub. I'm going to go ahead and remove this Phillips head screw. All right, now I'm going to go around to the front and I'm going to disengage the spray nozzle, drop it. All right, to remove this dryer, make sure we always use 2 men, team left. Safety first, let's protect our backs. All right, so as you can see on this washing machine, now that we've got the dryer off the top of it, these shocks do not have a cutout down here, which means the only way to remove this shock is it's got to come all the way out through the bottom. So I've got to be able to pull the tub before I can actually pull the shock. So what I'm going to do to protect these shocks, I'm going to lift it up, I'm going to drop the suspension holder, pull my shock out. All right, so once you get the shock or the suspension rod here loose, there are little clips that are actually built into the side of our tub. Just go ahead and lock it in on that little clip, and that's going to protect that suspension rod while we actually pull our assembly out. All right, so I've gotten to the point to where now I've got to release these wire harnesses. I have 1 wire harness that's running around the side over to my water valves, my door lock assembly, pressure sensor, all those components. This wire harness is actually going down to the components underneath of my unit. So I've got a zip tie here that is actually holding the 2 harnesses together. I've got 1 ground screw right here that I've got to release as well. Once I get this off, that should be anything that was actually hanging onto my tub assembly, so I can actually pull my tub assembly out. There's my ground right there. All right, so there's 2 ways you can do this. We can pull the whole assembly out through the top. I'm going to go ahead and pull mine out through the opening in the front. Now the only reason this gets tricky is because of this brace. So as I'm leaning forward, I'm going to pull back, lean a little bit more forward, pull back. So now my whole assembly will actually come through this front opening here. There we go. All right, so now that we've got the tub out, that leaves us with our wire harness that's running around the top here. Supplies our voltage to our pressure sensor, our lid lock. It sends power down to our water valves, which our water valve is actually just 1 screw that comes in through the back. It's one screw you take out, and this actually slides down and pulls off. We've got the insulation down here on the bottom that's part of our quiet pack to help this thing run quieter, and our drain line going out the back, but I think you guys can handle all of that. So I'm going to go ahead and set the cabinet out the way, and let's focus on our tub and our motor assemblies. All right, so if you notice on all of our suspension rods, there's a spring that connects it to the top tub ring. Now you can take it off either which way. You can either pop it off here, or I prefer to take it off the actual suspension rod top. So if you look right here at the top, it's actually got a little holder that holds it onto our tension rod. I'm going to lift the spring up over the top of that holder, and I'm just going to unscrew. And we do that with all 4 of them. All right, so now all we have to do is we're going to release all of our clips all the way around. Take this whole thing and set it off to the side. All right, guys, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the agitator on this unit. First, we're going to start by pulling the agitator cap off, set it off to the side. It does just lift up and off the top. Then I'm going to use a 10 millimeter. There is a bolt down here in the very bottom that we have to remove. You're going to have to use an extension or 3 in my case to get all the way down to the bottom of the agitator to get it. Once we get it loose, we're going to grab our agitator, we're going to rock it back and forth as we're pulling upwards. The whole thing is going to come off, and I'm going to set this thing off to the side. All right, so now we're going to take the wash basket out. I've got an H6 Allen fitting that I'm going to use for these 2 bolts down here in the bottom. Do not try to use a standard Allen key. Make sure that you are using a metric so that you don't strip these out. Once you get both bolts loose, we should be able to lift this entire tub, or the entire wash basket, up and out of here. Now we can set this off to the side. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my entire tub assembly, flip it upside down, turn it around so y'all can see. All right. So we've got a cover for my motor and my pulley assembly, drain pump, capacitor, clutch assembly, and our shocks. So right now, if we wanted to, we could actually unclip our shock from the top of our tub, and we could remove the entire shock. But I'm not going to release mine. I think you guys can understand it from there. All right, so let's go ahead and take our cover off right here. Now there's 4 bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to use a 10 mil to take them out. All right, so now we can take this cover, set this completely off to the side. It's going to leave us with our drive system. So let's look at how this works. So as our clutch moves, let's take our clutch off of here real quick. So our clutch is actually 2 3/8 bolts. Two 3/8. I disconnected the wire harness, so that is our clutch assembly right there. So the clutch has a finger that just goes all the way to the front and then all the way to the back, and it's shifting this up and down. Take our belt off of here. So whenever this goes up, it contacts this other gear, these teeth underneath here. Pretty cool. Let's go ahead and take the connection for my motor off right here. It's like a 6-pin connector. Actually has 6 wires in it, 2 red, 2 black, and 2 white. We got a ground right here. Pull that ground off. We got 2 bolts holding our wash motor in place. They look like they're about 1/2 inch. So that's our entire wash motor right there. And take this and set it off to the side. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to disengage my wire harness off of this assembly. I want to pull that up. Take a look at our tub seal. Grab a pair of needles. Might make this a little easier. I always end up popping these out because I want to reuse them. I don't want to have to try to figure a way to get those back in. All right, so if you look at my assembly here, you guys will notice that I've got numerous bolts going through here. The ones that we're going to be removing are going to be the 3/8, which are going to be these. The 10mm ones, which is the ones that are actually in the indented portion, we're going to leave those in place. I'm not removing those. All right. There's our gear assembly, and it comes with our tub seal right here on the top. Go ahead and set this off to the side. So what are we left with? The capacitor, 1 bolt. We can take the capacitor out. Don't know that we have a lot of failures on the capacitor. I am going to go ahead and take the drain pump off. I'm just curious as to what that seal looks like for the drain pump. It looks like that's a 5/16, 3 bolts, 1, 2, 3. All righty. Nice little rubber seal that goes around it. I have had water inside of this unit before, so a little bit of moisture, but yeah. Just make certain if you replace the drain pump, you remember to put that gasket, you remember to put our gasket back on. All right, guys, so that's about everything pulled apart on one of these units. I'm going to go ahead and take a few minutes to put it back together.